Welcome to Athlete Complete, where we host raw and open conversations about the details that impact performance from current and former professional athletes for parents, players, coaches, and fans. Greg Mack, welcome to the Athlete Complete podcast.
Thanks, man. I'm excited to join you guys. Looking forward to it.
I mean, besides me, this is a pretty formidable crew of hosts that you're talking with, as you know.
Okay, now I'm nervous.
Don't be nervous, man.
Greg, have you always been in Columbus?
Yep, yeah. Except for when I was in the service. I moved to Columbus in '77, and then after high school went to Ohio State, and then was in the service for 6 years, and then came back.
Yeah, I played for the crew 2007, 2008, and I wish that I would have gone to see you then.
Yeah, boy, yeah. We had one player come up. I cannot remember his name for the life of me now. And then
Danny O'Rourke.
Danny O'Rourke, yeah. Danny O'Rourke came in for a short period of time, and Brooke Hamilton, who was a strength conditioning specialist for the crew, who used to come up to our study groups every now and then.
Oh, that's great. I needed you. My rookie year, I pulled my quad 3 times, and the same exact spot over and over again, and was shut down on a season-ending injury. And it was the most miserable time of my life, 2007. I can honestly say that.
I'm sorry to hear that you have bad memories of Columbus. That's unfortunate.
No, the next year I was good, healthy, won a championship, so I ended on a good note there.
That was a good year that year. We were really excited, so that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully your quadricep feels better now.
Yeah, we're good.
It might be. We'll see. I think that thing still kicks on every once in a while.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, the body is weird, and I'm still trying to navigate it. That's for sure.
It is.
Aren't we all? And we're all getting younger. And Greg, if you would give our listeners just a quick sort of elevator explanation of your both diverse and extensive backgrounds, just to kind of give an idea of what it is that you do.
Wow. I mean, what do I do every day in my practice is, I work with the human body trying to solve, problems with movement and pain and dysfunction, mainly neuromusculoskeletal issues, but of course there's metabolic issues. I mean, my background is in engineering academically, and so I was a mechanical nuclear engineer on a fast attack nuclear submarine for a while, operating a primary power plant. And so I was also a Navy diver and all those things, including being a recreational athlete and involved in sports my whole life recreationally. Just always been involved and interested in, using my body and being involved in sports and athletics. And, as a Navy diver, I had to be in shape. Like any professional athlete, you got to be in shape, to play your sport and to be a professional. So that was kind of my first experience of really like, wow, I have to stay in shape or I'll lose my qualification, which I worked very hard to get. And then I was fortunate enough to have a bunch of guys I worked with who were into exercise and fitness and sports as well. So been physically active my whole life, and probably the early academic experiences in engineering, have underpinned the way I see and interpret things for sure. So definitely looking at the body, from an engineering perspective, if you will.
I love that. One thing that has come up through these interviews that we've done is the sort of individuation issue that everybody has. Whether you're a 16-year-old standout stud baseball pitcher or a 24-year-old $1 million point guard, we all have different issues that imply different treatments or approaches for. And so what I'm kind of curious to start us out off is, are there generalized notions about how to take care of the body or how to recover from injuries that some people wouldn't really think about or might be surprised to hear?
I don't know if there's anything unusual or new or novel in that regard. I mean, I think it comes from a body view, a philosophy of body, and how people even think about what the body is. I mean, most of the predominant modalities I see now being used are primarily passive modalities, cupping, e-stim, or you as a person are just laying there, receiving this externally applied process to you to try to affect your materials in some way, your tendon, your ligament, your skin, your muscle, whatever, and that's fine. But I think what I've tried to do in my own practice and the way I think about the system, because I'm a systems guy, is again rooted in the idea that no matter what passive modalities are used, it doesn't. It seems that exercise, in the broadest sense of that term, is always around, right? We gotta move and contract and stretch and do all this other stuff, but I mean, I haven't really seen anything super dramatic that suddenly you do this one thing and your body's healed now and forever and you'll never have a problem ever again. I just don't see any of that.
Damn
it just looks like different ways to try to stimulate cellular processes to help the immune cascade restore cellular function to pre-injury state. Okay, that sounds cool, but even then, the pain docs I work with, the orthopedists, they'll tell you once you're injured, that tissue's never the same. It just isn't. Now, can it be brought up to speed so it's still good enough for whatever performance dynamic and conditions you put it under? Sure. I've seen amazing reconstructive surgeries and people come back from traumatic injuries and still be able to perform pretty well, but they're never quite the same, right? I mean, Bo Jackson's a classic example of an internal bleeding femoral artery tear that ended up with a hip joint replacement, and he was still incredible, but he was never the same ever again, right? And so in fact, I did a webinar on this. I think injuries in general are forms of post-traumatic stress. I think they leave their engram, in your neurochemical system. There's a mark left there. And if you're accumulating injuries over time, that's the real challenge, I think, is that often these passive modalities and these approaches are subject to localism, right? I hurt my quad 2 or 3 times, and so we have to rub the quad, stretch the quad, heat the quad, cool the quad, foam roll the quad, and everything's on the quad, right? Not understanding that that the quad is part of an entire integrated system, and that injury could have affected any number of other parts that are never looked at. So that's that's the thing that I'm focused on now.
So if you're a head trainer at the Mariners or the Sounders, has it frustrated you to see that? To me, I was in the game for a long time, and it seemed to be the same things every year, over and over and over and over. Is it just that is what's easiest to do? Is it just hard to break in and change mentality of a trainer or a training staff? And some of it works, maybe, and some of it doesn't with repeat injuries. Has that frustrated you to watch that in real time?
Yeah, it's definitely a frustrating, problem, especially from the perspective I'm coming from, I wasn't formally trained as a athletic trainer. I didn't come up through that course curriculum that tends to make you kind of myopic, really, about what to do, right, with an injury. It's very protocolish. Here's the diagnosis. Here's the treatment. That's what you do. Should be done in 4 to 6 weeks. Good to go, right? And sometimes it works well. There's no doubt that there's some success. But those accumulating, stubborn, things the current models are not set up for, not even in a traditional medical model. And I think mainly the issue I run into when I'm talking with those professionals who are smart and trying to do good. I mean, they're trying to help their athletes for sure. Is that one? There's a body view problem, the way they even look at what the body is or think it is that they're dealing with, and two, time. I just keep hearing, I don't have Greg, I see what you're doing. I don't have the time for all that. Right? And we just got to get these guys back and get these gals back on the field as soon as possible. And if not, we're going to send them to the surgeon, and the surgeon's going to poke around in there, and hopefully they come back from that. And if they can't, I'm sorry. That's just unfortunate because we don't have the time to search through and figure out why this motor control system is not responding properly. And it could be coming from that, and that's the crazy part, is it could be coming from any number of other subsystems. And unless you have some way of even checking to see if there's an influence from your eye motor or your cervical or pelvic floor, you'll miss it. You'll just miss it. And so, but that takes some time.
How much time does it take to kind of go through that process? Like find out exactly the culprit is?
Well, just the baseline process that I use, that I teach. Once you're competent at it, you can knock one out after the initial interview, in 40, 45 minutes. But even that part of it, I see missing, right? I mean, the interviewing process to try to get an accurate history about what's happened to you in the past that could be accumulating and overlapping and converging on why you feel the way that you do right now. And historicity of the athlete is not really even explored at all. There's no connection made between 3 ankle inversion sprains on the right ankle, a contusion of their, noggin, or a concussion and a whiplash, that could be related to, why the knee thing that's in the current state isn't responding properly, right? There's no thinking that those previous injuries are somehow influencing the system's ability to restore the control. And we see that all the time. So the interview, 45 minutes, questionnaire, got to fill that out, 40 minutes to do my baseline. I got to, build a profile. I'm like a forensic detective. I'm looking at this crime scene, trying to figure out, what's relevant here, the gum wrapper, or the cigarette butt, the piece of candy. I don't know. I'm just going to collect it and then, build a model and then analyze the model. And then I'm going to say, okay, now I can start to see, where some of these problems might be converging into giving you a systemic resistance to getting better.
Sounds to me like 2 hours would be worth, someone getting re-injured over. You get someone back, you don't want them back for 3 weeks.
You certainly think so, especially when there's millions of dollars on a contract, right? Or somebody's in a contract renewal period, and you're thinking, geez, this is one of your, star athletes, and you don't want to spend the time to figure out what's going on here. It is very frustrating when I hear that kind of stuff. So,
yeah, it sounds.
If we build off the time issue, though, the time issue is not the time spent with the athlete necessarily. It is to become competent enough to look around and collect enough data and do it that way. Because they spend time sending you guys everywhere. It's getting an accurate picture of what's going on here. And I've taken, I think, every course Greg has to offer. And the idea that, I definitely had hip problems, but we didn't look around anywhere else. Like, we just constantly treated a tight hip. And I did everything humanly possible to deal with that. But we were looking in the wrong spots. And we had no clue. We were just shooting in the dark, because that's where I was feeling sensations that I didn't like. And the responsibility of the people I was working with was just get rid of those sensations and you should be good, and not paying attention to what the sensations were actually trying to tell me. So that when he goes back to talk about body view, that's what he means. Like we just have this, we're foundationally not looking at things on the same level, and that you can go organization to organization. Everyone's doing it a little bit differently. I mean, when I went down to work with James with the Dodgers, he had a shoulder thing going on, and I asked him if he's been holding his kids a lot, and he's like, "Yeah, of course." And they didn't take that into consideration. I mean, there's a lot of things that can be playing into. It's not just the act of what he's doing on the field. There's so much stuff that plays into this, your systems, that you got to take into account, and there's no effort there, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, I mean, probably, the great experience I had operating, this nuclear power plant on a submarine, which just sounds crazy in and of itself, right? Is
it sure
it's
does.
pretty, yeah, it's pretty straightforward what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to heat up some water to create some steam and direct that steam to some turbines to turn stuff, right? I mean, okay, that's what the whole system's trying to do, right? Now, the engineering and the technical and the scientific stuff that has to go into that, that gets pretty hairy real fast, especially when you're talking about nuclear power. But, when I'm walking around operating the plant, I got thousands of gauges I'm looking at: pH, pressure, temperature, flow rates, right? And this is all giving me indications about how the plant's running. I can't look at one gauge and know the health of the plant and whether it's doing what we want. I have to, look at the totality of the information. And unfortunately, with the human body, I don't have pH gauges and pressure gauges I can look at. And unfortunately, a lot of the emphasis now on just, taking a torque value or jumping off a force plate or something, it's simply not enough, let alone relevant to, why the system is operating the way it is. And so, for me, it's an information problem. And so I've got to find out, where you're having information control governance problems. And that gives me, at least on the external side, some inferences about what's going on internally, because you can't control this, or you can't react to this, or you can't contract that. Because again, body view wise, it looks to me like just about everything about us as human beings is convergent on changing joint angles, generating tension, regulating tension, and holding positions. And so the reason you have a liver and a pancreas and a centralized encephalized nervous system and synovial joints and lungs and a heart is to support moving around and holding position in a gravity field. That's what it looks like to me. And so if you start having trouble demonstrating torque development and tension and regulating tension as the final kind of pathway, the output of everything inside of you, well, that's clearly an indicator something's not right. You can't generate the proper information to control this and stability. And in mechanical engineering, we have the definition of stability is, very specific in terms of how we would judge the health of a system. And we can't judge the health of a system just by looking at it. We have to perturb it. We have to push it and then watch it react and see what it does. And now we can make some statements and judgments about how well the system is functioning. Just looking at it is not enough. And so our ability to make critical observations of how the system's functioning is key. But again, from a relatively simple perspective, you've got to be able to move and control your joints under different conditions. And that takes time to sample through all of that to start to see kind of the profile of oh, here's the parts of your system you can't really generate control over very good. And now we can start to institute specific interventions to just systematically restore that. And what happens is, as you restore all that systematically, you just feel better. The information quality now is much higher, and then your brain, can calm down a little bit and might change its conclusion about what's going on and remove the conclusion of pain or tightness or stiffness or, whatever English word it's making you choose to describe the sensation you're experiencing.
Question that just popped into my mind is understanding that, when you look at things, you're trying to fix a problem. Are you ever looking at the athletes that are consistently pushing their bodies to that like next level that people would deem maybe extreme, and or athletes that can play, 34 soccer games in a year and do it over 10 years and never have a muscle pull. Are you looking at those athletes and saying, what are they doing? Are they just the outliers that somehow have been able to suppress, maybe, like you said, PTSD from, because the culprits aren't just from injuries, right? It could be from childhood trauma. It could be from stress at home, whatever it may be. Are you profiling those athletes as well and just asking yourself, how are they able to do it? Or are you strictly just kind of thinking about, you've got a problem, how can we fix it?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. It certainly would be worth exploring some more. I mean, because my private practice is people come to me because they got problems. And so I rarely see anyone who's like, I feel great, watch me over a 10-year period and see what happens. Genetics play a role in that. Luck plays a little bit of a role in that. There are, folks who just are better at handling stress. They have the cellular makeup, the genetic makeup to do that. And so those are outliers, to me. But it seems like once the injuries begin, there just seems to be this kind of a cascading, effect. And some athletes, they don't tell anybody they're hurt, right? And they don't want anybody to know. So they just suck it up and go. Because they want to play.
Do you find that the mental...
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Greg.
Yeah,
I was just going to ask.
Brooke used to tell me that. He would say that some of the athletes that he worked with, they were hurt, but they didn't want to tell anybody because they don't want to be pulled off the field. I remember that famous, Peyton Manning thing where he feigned the cognitive test for concussion protocol so that if he did get a concussion, he still would pass the test. Which is still mind-boggling to me. Like, wow, dude. Okay, man. That's a mindset.
He's a smart guy.
That's a mindset, right? So, okay.
Yep. I was going to ask you, do you find that the mental ties into the physical a lot? Like, do you see, when you see patients, they're stressed out or they're depressed or something like that? Does that tie into some injuries that you see?
There's no question about it. It's part of the information set, right? The cognitive side, the emotional, mental side, how they perceive their own sensations. I have some individuals who they get a sensation they don't like, and boy, they make a mountain out of a molehill. This thing is a disaster. They catastrophize the problem, and there are other folks who they get injured and they're just kind of like, yeah, my shoulder hurts. Let's go. Right. And some of that's a part of education or how they might be raised or how they're taught to perceive their body sensations. The way I think about when I have a pain or a discomfort, the way I think about it, because I have some education and I don't think about it the way the average consumer would think about pain. Because I have a sense of the information problem, the cellular processes, the inflammatory processes, and I'm not going to panic about it. I'm going to work with it. I'm like, my life's not over, but there are some mental, cognitive and emotional personality constructs that, boy, they feel something in their knee wrong and the world shuts down. It's unfortunate.
Oh, that's me.
Yeah. Is that you, Brad?
Yeah. I mean, if I had a slight Achilles pain while playing or a toe or, a knock on I immediately went to the place of, you're injured, you're out, your contract's done. They're going to find someone else to replace you. And I just ran through that checklist every single time, right? That was my hormonal response, which I'm sure makes sense now, obviously, was the, wrong response and approach. No matter how much they told me, like, oh, you're going to be fine in two days or 4 days or 4 weeks, whatever it was always like, now my life's over. I'm done playing.
I want to inspect that a little bit. That's super interesting though, because maybe, you're saying now that was not the right way to do it, but it served you obviously, like maybe catastrophization, which is probably not a word, early in a, turf toe made you protect yourself a little more in the rest of training, or helped you. It must have served you in some sort of way. And so I wonder, like, yeah, it's maybe not the best, but it probably helped you because you had an incredibly long career.
It's possible it did, but it's also possible it didn't, and he was really just tied up in his identity. And when you feel something that's going to be a threat to what you can do that gives you your identity, then the sensations are higher. I was the same way, to the point where I had surgeries that I don't think I really needed, just because I had sensations I didn't like, and the only way to get rid of it was, I don't know, someone fix the problem. And that was a lack of, I would go and term it emotional intelligence or emotional diversification of understanding what I was feeling. Cause so Greg touched on it, where he feels some things and he's got enough information now to go, no big deal or big deal. If I had that education as a younger person, I would have made better decisions. I think we're seeing that more and more often in the youth sports space, where these kids don't know what they're feeling, and they're so attached to who they're becoming. An injury devastates their world, and then you have adults around them that don't know how to support that. So it's a big contributing factor.
James, what was your style? Would you play through injuries on the spectrum of, oh my God, my life is over, to I may have just torn something, but I'm just going to push through it? Where were you?
I think with me, I had so many injuries. I think I got to a point where I probably did harm myself, but I felt a little something, but I kept on going because I can't be hurt again. This is, I don't want to be out again for 4 months or 2 months or whatever it was. So I keep on going, and I probably made the injury worse than it needed to be. It's probably a thing where when I had my back surgery, when I had the cyst in my back, I came back in 2020 and I wasn't right. And I probably shouldn't have pitched, but it was my free agent year, and I wanted to show that I was healthy. And that led to my Tommy John, which then kept me out for 2 more years. If I hadn't pitched in 2020, I probably would have been healthy 21, 22, instead of rehabbing my Tommy John in 21, 22. And that took away, the prime of my career. I basically missed 3 years, the middle of my career.
These are difficult, again, decision problems. And when you contextualize, why am I doing this to the system? What does it mean to the system? Where does the system want to be? What are the pressures on the decision? And when you're looking at $1 million contracts and careers, and they're finite, you're not going to play these sports till you're 80. These variables are weighted, and that's another thing that's I think missing in that process is how you make good decisions in this, and who can help you objectify this a little bit better, and give you a better sense of how to make this decision. And there is a decision science. We teach some of that in the course about how do you weight variables, how do you identify the variables, how do you reconcile objective and subjective variables, so you come up with the best possible decision, even though it's probabilistic in outcome, and maybe you make the best possible decision, it still doesn't go your way, but okay, at least you went through it. I think often decision making is more too Machiavellian. It's the ends justified the means, right? I mean, you watch it in sports all the time. 4th and 1, on the 2, game's on the line, coach is looking at the stats, going, 42% of the time we get this 1 yard gain, and this time he doesn't. It's the worst decision in the world, right? Because he didn't make it, right? But from a rational decision making perspective, it was the right decision, to make. And so that's what's difficult in that's what Bayesian theorem's trying to do, is reconcile, the subjective with the objective, to try to come up with the best possible decision given the information that you have now. But when you're talking about neuromusculoskeletal injuries, and the human body, you do have to be careful, because if you keep exacerbating that thing, it is not going to get better. It's just going to get worse. I mean, maybe you guys have seen some of your teammates who've had an ACL injury and they think they're okay and they injured it again right away, right? Not good. Or they're in rehab, trying to rehab from the surgery and they injured it in rehab. Now it's even more compounded worse, right? So this is some tricky business.
Yeah, I feel as like for the decision making, it can be hard on athletes, I think, because like everybody has their own motives, right? Like if anything, an athlete needs to be talked down, and these teams want you back out there too. There's for them to get you back out there earning your money. So maybe you get pushed a little bit more than you should at times. I just think that I don't know if there needs to be someone for these athletes to talk to help them come up, plan for themselves, and make these big decisions out there. Because the teams, I just don't know there's a lot of people I trust, but they still have their own motives, even if it's subconscious to get you as soon as possible,
I agree. There are some real unique pressures there. Everybody, we see it at the high school level, where you got a kid that's a high level pitcher, he's a 10th grader and he's throwing fastballs in the upper 70s already. And you're just like, holy mackerel, man, this is incredible, and the coaches want that guy. They're doing the pitch count. They're like, man, we can get 10 more out of him. 2 more innings, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. We got 2 games coming up. Tough team. He probably needs 4 days of rest, but he'll be all right. We'll get him back in there again, And they're wearing this kid out. Just wearing him out. They want to win. I get it.
Yeah. In the world, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
When you're dealing with the high school kids, especially, and I think that this podcast is geared towards, we do talk about the professional life and have professionals on, but I think we always revert back to, being a kid and how that felt for us and the, good things we were around, bad things we were around. And you've been around enough high school athletes and youngsters that these injuries are happening to them as they are professional athletes.
Unbelievable.
Are there any mitigating tools that they can do, on a regular basis that can help, mitigate these injuries? Is it prehab? Is it diet? Is it, more sleep? A couple tools that they can take home to say, okay, if I implement A, B, and C, I might see better results or at least, decrease my chance for injury.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, and that needs to be discussed across the board because you're talking about culture, which I know is a big thing for Ben, and not just the culture of the team and the coaches and everyone around that, but the parents and how the parents, think about this situation. There's a lot of pressure from parents. Make no mistake about that. But I would say there needs to be regular check-ins. Somebody who knows this kid's body, is working off a baseline, who can periodically check in and say, hey, this part's working pretty good still. We got a problem over here. You're losing force production. You're losing range of motion based on your baseline. This tissue's building up some fatigue in it, and we're going to have to be careful about that and then communicate that to the parents and the coaches. Say, he needs a little bit more rest, and we got to put a little attention on this. So those regular kind of spot checks and checkups are the key there, I think, on top of, not being overtrained and playing 4 sports a year. Not only training with the team, but they got trainers outside the team. And, some of these kids are doing advanced Olympic lifting and they don't have the motor skills for it. They don't need, and some of them don't need to be doing hanging cleans and heavy front squats. And some of the stuff I see is just like, what do you got this 13-year-old doing this for? This is crazy. But
we
regular
talk a little bit about sorry. We talk a little bit on this podcast about life balance and stuff like that, and taking time off. It sounds to me like you're talking about these kids that take no time off. It's going one sport into the other, always working on something, always working out, training. Do you find that, prescribing just some time off and just some rest and maybe some outside of your sport helps people get better faster?
No, there's no question about it. Yeah, we get throwing athletes, we get racket athletes, right? And they're just year round. And, all of a sudden, they're juniors and they're like, my wrist is all messed up, like a chronic elbow tendonitis, and I think I got a labral tear in my shoulder. And you're like, you're 16. What are you doing? Well, we play year round. My coaches and everybody wants me in tournaments, and I'm practicing 3 hours a day. And I'm like, when's the last time you took a couple weeks and chilled? And they're just like, what do you mean? It's impossible. I can't do that. Right. It's like, yeah, you need to, it's called fatigue resistance, right? It's one of the things that we have a little process to check in with, and it's related to the idea of allostatic load and, building up. And if, no one is completely resistant to fatigue, it's going to accumulate at some level, at some rate. And so, you got to check in and say, hey, look, your system is not recovered. And what's interesting about that to me is it tends to show up in motor output. They lose torque production. You just got to find out where that is. And if you're good at sampling, you'll find out you're 50% off the amount of baseline force you produced, 3 months ago, 4 months ago for these 2 or 3 configurations. So you're not ready, until you can recover to go back out at least at a high level. So, yeah, it's just hard. It's hard for an athlete to do nothing for a couple of weeks, right? Except for walk on the treadmill, maybe.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious about this. If this early training for younger and younger athletes who are getting stress fractures or overuse injuries, if that's really the case, then wouldn't that play out at the collegiate and professional level and manifest in some like drop in velocity for pitchers? Or wouldn't that drop, what you see, what the question I'm trying to ask, like, is speed going down at the major league pitching level? Like, are players slower at the professional level in this generation than they were like a generation ago? And I don't know that that's true. And I'm curious, if we are having these overtraining issues at younger and younger, wouldn't the quality drop or the athleticism drop? Wouldn't that play out in mass?
It could, unless there's and I would suspect there's almost a self-selection process. It's kind of a survive or die, and those genetics and those morphologies and the geometries and everything that goes with that can survive and tolerate those stresses. They can keep going. The other ones drop off. They can't keep going. I remember in the Navy, when I was trying to qualify to be a Navy diver, I mean, it's a brutal physical process, because they're trying to push you physically to test your emotional and cognitive stability, because they know the reason you're trying to get this job is it's high risk and you can die if you make a mistake, right? And so they don't, they want to test you. And I was in a class with rescue swimmers, coasties, and Marine Corps recon Marines, and you had to go through a pre-qualification process physically just to even qualify to test, and it was crazy. And I think by the time my class was done, we had 50-60% attrition, because guys just got hurt along the way, and there were some of us that we just didn't get hurt. It's a very strange thing, right? Now, could that have been because of previous injuries as children or whatever? Maybe, but no one ever interviewed me about, as a kid, you ever break your arm or, fall off a swing set and tweak your neck? No one ever asked me that stuff. And so maybe there's a part of that, speaking to your question, is that, by the time you get to the upper collegiate Division I, Division II, and pros, you've been winnowed. The chaff and the wheat have been separated,
Yeah, and I think you look at, he keeps alluding back to genetics and luck, and there's so much of that goes into there. And even guys that are genetically capable of doing it have ticking time bombs underneath their skin that we don't see as well. That's been building from years and years of training, right? I think the overcorrection that we're making in our culture is training everybody with the frequency and loading from younger and younger ages because they think it's going to yield those results at older ages. And I think more often than not, you're getting the opposite effect. You're getting kids that are burning out physically and their velocity is dropping by the time they need to be peaking and showing their stuff. Look at James right there on the screen. In my screen, he looks like a very average white guy, but if I see him in person, he's a 6'5", 230-pound human, right? That's why he can throw the ball really fast, along with being athletic. There's genetics that play into this thing massively. And, when I was playing, I overachieved, I think, to get to the level I got to a certain degree, especially genetically. Working hard wasn't a problem, but I remember watching a video of a guy named Sean Johnson, who Brad played with and against a ton, and he was a rookie goalkeeper, and there was a YouTube video, and he just stood underneath the basketball hoop and jumped and did a tomahawk slam. And at that point, I could maybe oomph a volleyball into a dunk. I realized, I don't know how long I'm going to be able to do this, because there's kids like that who are going to be popping up that just, I won't have a chance here. So the genetic stuff is really, really important. I think it's lost on a lot of parents shoving their kids into these realms. The realities. I'm saying don't go for it, but go into it like having some awareness here. It's interesting. It's a problem.
I mean, I think you could probably overcome some genetic limitations, if you want to call that, but the way that you'd have to train and regulate and rest would be different than someone who's gifted, in that way. It reminds me of that movie King Richard, right, about Serena Williams' father. I think Will Smith played him, and I don't know if you guys saw this movie. He was very insistent, and remember the head coach was livid because he pulled him from tournaments and said, "Look, these are kids. I don't want them working out in the summer, right?" And he just kept saying, "No, you're going to ruin their careers," and he saved their careers. Now they both started accumulating injuries because they're pushing their bodies to the limits, which is what athletes are trying to do. But over time, it's still caught up with them. But they certainly had much longer careers, I think, than if they tried to participate 24/7, 12 months a year at relatively high levels competing. So yeah, I mean, even look at some of the athletes who are genetically gifted and are pushing themselves hard. Even age is going to catch up with them, or they have to spend a ludicrous amount of time and money on nothing but recovery, and diet, and having dietitians prepare every meal, and coaches and massage therapists and trainers around them 24/7, ice baths and bariatric chambers, oxygen. I mean, wow, but the cost of that is unbelievable. How much that costs to do that, to keep your recovery at the very smallest margin possible, or at the fastest rate possible, takes an absolute tremendous amount of time and resources to try to figure that out. Because it's going to be different.
You mentioned earlier about you mentioned earlier about pushing and perturbing the body to get some understanding about what's going on. Do you have a similar process for pushing and perturbing the mentals? Like, I just have this silly idea of working someone through an exercise regimen while playing Icelandic death metal to see how they respond to stressful stimuli, or bad mouthing them and calling them a loser while they're going through the training to see how they manage that sort of thing. Is there a metric or a protocol that you use to test it?
I'm not. That's a lot of liability in there, right? No, I don't. Again, when I was in the service,
tickling them while they're on the balance beam.
Absolutely.
Spit wads at them.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing, but yeah, actually, demeaning and degrading them, and taking someone to physical exhaustion, or what they perceive to be maximal physical exhaustion, saying, okay, now we can really get started, right? Where they're vomiting and, okay, CrossFit attempted to do this, right? Let's take, these extreme military style programs, which were set up to actually try to protect people from being put into situations that are life and death for themselves and their colleagues, and saying, if you cannot handle the physical and emotional duress that you're going to be in, we want to know now, right? And so we're going to put you through this nightmare to flush this out. And okay, but that's for a civilian to do that. You're gonna get hurt. They're gonna get hurt is what's going to happen. They got TV shows now, right? You see the celebrities on these shows, and these Force Recon Marine guys are taking them through these crazy scenarios just to see when they break. When will they emotionally break and give up? Ring the bell, right? We put a bell somewhere, and you don't like this, ring it, and you're out. But yeah, if you have somebody screaming in your face all the time, saying you don't need to be here, don't you want a nice warm donut and coffee? Are you tired? Don't you want to be with your mother? Wow. That's for a very particular context.
Greg, what is it about the human being that wants to be put through that?
Well, some, right? Some.
In your experience. Yeah. I mean, for some, but I mean, CrossFit is a dedicated, and that's about as intense as you can get in a group setting, right? And you are, being pushed to your limits in every single workout, and people continue to come back regardless of injury, whatever it may be. You've obviously gone through military training as well. What is it about the human that wants that?
Yeah, I think there are some personalities, again, I don't know where that starts in childhood or what that's all about, that they want to be challenged. They want to be, doing something that no one else is doing, and okay, I think that's fine. But there are many people that don't want to do that. I think that's one of the big beefs I have with the modern, fitness and exercise movement is this: every human being is an athlete and should be treated like one or something. And it's like, no, my 60-year-old diabetic with 2 total knees doesn't want to be treated like an athlete. That's not what she wants. Doesn't need to be treated like that. We're not trying to take her to the edge of her flight envelope and then push it a little bit farther just to see if she can handle the G forces, right, without passing out. Why would we take these risks, right? So a lot of what I do is risk assessment and mitigation ultimately, right? It's like, why do we need to take these risks? What is it that you want to do with the system? Okay. You want to go that far? We're going to have to build you up to take more risk so you don't break. On a submarine, every few years they take you down to what's called test depth, where they're literally testing the integrity of the hull to see if it's going to break. And so we go down to 800 feet and we got to go around with flashlights and we're inspecting all the seams and is there water leaking in here or what? And then they blow the ballast tanks, which then just turns you into a cork, and you just fly to the surface, right? A very high risk maneuver to do because you could break something permanently there, and kill a lot of people. But they had to do it every now and then because the Navy had to know what's the operational capability of this thing at the edges of what it's designed to do. And so we took those risks, but not very often. It was only every several years. It's not something you would do every month, right? Because every time you take a material, up to its, yield stress strain rate, you're probably degrading the molecular bonding in some way that you can't see. And just like a paper clip that you bend back and forth, after a while, you're not sure when, snap, it's going to break.
I think along those lines, frustrations for athletes in particular, especially ones who think they're doing everything possible to stay healthy, is that they don't have the awareness that no matter what you're doing, that stuff's happening underneath
That's right.
the skin. Like the materials are getting affected, they're getting changed. And it's because you're not trained at an early age to have an awareness of that stuff, of what this stress is actually doing to you and what the long-term cost and effect is.
By the time,
so you just do it.
Yeah,
and then you get really, really upset when you're done.
By the time the stressor, whatever's happening inside your body's materials, which is kind of this insidious process outside of an acute event, it's building up. It's below your perception for a long time. You're not perceiving, the breakdown that's happening at the cellular level until you get to an inflammatory level where enough chemistry is being released by these cells from the endocrine perspective that now the sensory receptors can detect that and send that information to your brain. So now you know. But by then, the damage has been already accumulated, right? We call that allostatic load. And that's why, speaking of what Brad was talking about earlier, these check-ins, be like, let's check you out because there may be something going on that's below your current conscious awareness, something you've lost that you're just not aware of. And we're going to make you aware of it so that we can deal with it now. Not wait for the sensation to be there, because by then it's too late.
Yeah.
I know that you worked with an old teammate of mine. I just say, I don't know if you're allowed to talk about everything you did with him. I'm curious. Did you find it was a recovery thing with him, or did you have to build up? I know he had a lot of injuries and stuff like that, and didn't know. Was that like a pushing the envelope type thing to build up his strength, or is it mostly just finding different ways to recover?
I didn't work with Chris directly. Two specialists that I certified did, Kirby and Jay down in Naples, and they kind of kept me up to speed on what was going on. But he's a classic example of cumulative stress, and that not being dealt with properly, and then you get compensation, that decompensation, and I got neck pain. He's got this weird pain in his shoulder, and no one really knows why it's there, and those guys found it and gave him an improvement that incredibly won the Cy Young and got a Golden Glove. It's incredible. Yeah. I don't know, what is it, 12th year or something? I mean, it's unbelievable. So it just goes to show you, right, so that if you find these problems, and the way we find them is totally unique. No one's looking at it like we are in terms of trying to find out where in particular the system is having trouble controlling itself. All the person can tell you is, I have these sensations around here that I don't like, right? Why they're there, then that's a different matter altogether. So they worked with him and found out, that it was something with his upward rotation of his shoulder with some lateral neck work, and they got that resolved. Kept on top of it. They checked him out every, I think, month or so, and he finished strong. So, and they got a couple other athletes, and I've had college pitchers come in, with post Tommy John, and it didn't go well, right? They weren't recovering well from it, and we figured out, what it was, but it wasn't the elbow per se, right? Everybody's focused on the pain here. Most of the time, it's something in the hand or fingers or in the trunk and spine that no one looked at to even see, why that could be contributing. So
really time to do what you were talking about earlier was just sort of like taking the time to really diagnose it and figure out where the root of the issue is, correct?
The sample, I call it sampling. It's called purposive sampling. So you have to sample your system to get a sense of the, what's the big picture here. Like I said, the crime scene, what the heck is, what's going on here? And then when you start adding in history and, they took, the palmaris longus tendon out of the same arm, and, so that seems convenient, right? But there's a big problem taking, tissues out of your body and using them for something else. I mean, that's another injury, believe it or not, right? But they don't really treat it like that was an injury as well. And so we had to deal with that, which was affecting, his hand and his grip strength and the way he held a baseball, right? Because holding a baseball, as you know, is a very unique kind of a grip. It's not really a squeeze. it's not really a pinch, right? It's a very unique way to conform your hand around something. And so we figured out that that was the real problem, but it wasn't because of the change in his rate, the ligament here in the surgery. It was because they took out the palmaris longus, which helps you do what? This, grab a baseball. So we had to remodel and recondition that. And now he's now he's back in college. He's throwing again in the low 90s and he's doing great. So.
Yeah, when they took out my palmaris, I found after the surgery, came back pitching, I could never throw my cutter. Like I just couldn't. I couldn't create the same power out of my fingers to throw the pitch the same way. And I never got it back after I had surgery. And I don't think it was my elbow. I think it was the fact that my palmaris was gone.
Correct. Yeah, there'd be no question in my mind about that, right? Because again, this gets back to the body view, right? Your palmaris longus grew and was attached to your nervous system with all the other muscles in your arm, right? And so not just as a mechanical actuator, but as an information synergist contributor to how your hand works together, now that's missing. And so your brain is like, wait a minute, we used to get a lot of information from this particular tissue about what's going on down here. And now that information's gone. How do we regulate what's going on now? So now it's missing information. And so that's why I called it an information problem. And we had to reprogram his arm in a sense, to work around the fact that information is now permanently gone. Now, fortunately, the human nervous system as a living entity can remodel. It can change. It can adapt. It can relearn how to do stuff. And so that's the exciting part about it. But you got to look around. I mean, if nobody's checking your finger strength and the torque production and how, they'll never know.
Would you recommend, like, for pitchers getting Tommy John, even at young ages, kids are getting it super young now, would you recommend not taking, if you have a palmaris, would you recommend not taking it out of your throwing arm and taking it from somewhere else? Maybe like your other arm, your non-dominant hamstring?
That's what I would say. Do it that way, and I know it's a hassle for the surgeon, right? Because he's got your arm or she's got your arm all dressed and ready to go. And it's just real easy to be, like, oh, we got to bring this arm and prep this arm. I know why they're doing it, because they're trying to save time as well. But it's a body view problem, just even from the surgeon's perspective, because you look at the palmaris longus and you're like, you look at it in a cadaver, it's real thin. Doesn't look like it produces a lot of force, right? It just attaches into the palm of your hand. It doesn't look like a big deal. And I guess just from, again, a mechanical actuator perspective, yes, it doesn't really produce tons of force or anything, but it's part of the information governing system. And that's gone now. That's gone. I mean, I've had surgeons tell me, I went to a client who had her joint replaced, and I was real curious, when you're in there, doc, and it's hard to replace a joint. I mean, you got to hand it to these surgeons. It's incredibly technical. But there's a lot of little tiny muscles around your hip joint. And I'm like, so when you're in there and you're cutting the bone out and you're taking all this stuff and get all these attachments in there, what do you do with some of these attachments, right? And, he just told me, the piriformis is not really a proprioceptive muscle, so don't really worry about it, which told me that he didn't reattach that thing. He didn't think it was worth it because it doesn't contribute much, right? So, and I've heard this before from other surgeons, right? And I'm like, that's a body view problem. We had a surgeon here, famous surgeon, Ray Tesner here in town. As a matter of course, when he did any knee surgery for any reason, lateral release. And people were starting to have trouble with their knees and their hips, 2-3 years later. And he got called out on it, and somebody filed a lawsuit, and he just said, we just do a lateral release as a matter of course, because you used to be a quadruped, and now that you're a bipedal stand-up ambulatory creature, you don't really need that tissue anymore. And he found out that a lot of surgeons did that, so it became standard of care, and he didn't get in any trouble. But you start messing with this material continuum, you're not only messing with the force production, you're messing with the information generation and governance part of it as well.
I feel like for athletes, the movements are so temperamental. Like throwing a baseball, it's very precise. And I'm sure in soccer there's certain precise movements you guys do too. That there's a feel, and if you lose that certain feel, I don't know if it's in your kick or whatever, that it's not going to allow you to do what you did before if the feel is a little bit different. Because it's very practiced. We do this for years and years and years to build up our feel of how to throw a pitch a certain way or how to kick a soccer ball a certain way. You take something out of that equation, like you're saying, and it changes everything. And you can relearn, but it's like you don't have 10 years, 15 years to then relearn all those motor patterns. I know it's in there somewhere, but the equation's different, like you're talking about.
No, it's a new pattern.
It's less than optimal.
Yeah. It's a new thing now. It's not the same thing. So it needs to be, but again, what's exciting is you have to get real granular with some of these things, right? And really tease it out and figure out where it is. And so that's what we try to do and try to teach, but because it can be remodeled. But yeah, that relationship between sensation, bodily sensation, and motor output is very, very tightly coupled. And one of the things that we look for is the relationship between sensation and motor output, right? And, you tear up your quad 3 times in a row and you're just like, I don't know, man, the front of my thigh is numb all the time. Can't really feel my kneecap anymore, right? Well, that's a problem because your brain needs to know where that is to change its position and put it in certain places in space-time, right? So if that's missing, well, now there's a gap. There's a delay. There's something off now, and that's what
interesting.
Just even verbal interviews that coaches, asking athletes, what's your sensation profile now? What are you feeling, man? And they got to pay attention to that, And somebody's saying, I don't know, but lately, man, I got this crazy feeling in the back of my neck here on the right, Does it hurt? It doesn't really hurt, but man, it's kind of weird. I don't know. Never had it before. Yeah, you'll be all right. Heat it, stretch it out.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a paperclip getting ready to break. Is what's happening there.
I've got lots of coaches in clubs that approach me about ACL prevention for their youth athletes, specifically on the female side. I'm sure Brad's got a lot of experience with that as well. My first question back to them is surrounding body view, because if they don't appreciate the symptoms, and a lot of these kids are just chronically tight, I don't know how to address it. Usually it's an overtraining thing. It's a high frequency thing. They're not tolerable to what they're doing at this point. They're only training their sport. They're not supplementing it with appropriate strength training and all that, and they're not looking anywhere else but the knee. When we had Dr. Samantha Brown on from the MLSPA, and she did her thesis on the concussions, and one of the things she brought up that they looked at specifically in females was the head size to neck size ratio and how that was contributing to concussions in females. And Greg, with what we know how the cervical spine can affect everything down the chain there, is ACL prevention, maybe we need to start looking at the neck more. Maybe we need to look other places. And how do you do ACL prevention on a scalable level without being able to interview and check in on some of these things?
So we get circle right back to the time thing, right? Does anybody want to take the time, to really, search this out, right? So, non-contact musculoskeletal injuries. You got to scratch your head, right? And you're like, what is going on here? Why are so many people pulling their hamstrings?
Yeah.
I mean, what is going on there? That's just crazy.
Yeah.
But I stretch them.
That's the thing.
Do the Nordic curl, right? I mean,
That's the thing that kind of blows my mind most about this conversation that we're having is there is not a one single easy answer to high performance, to injury prevention to injury recovery to what's the right amount of load, what's the optimal amount of recovery. And so, Ben's worked on all three of us. Ben's worked on myself and Brad and James. I've recovered from motorcycle accidents and foot injuries, and it's so complex. There is just not a formula. And what I wonder about is how long is it going to take before we take a more holistic, is an overused word, but a more holistic approach through this interview process, through allocation of time to understand the crime scene. Like, there's just not an easy answer here. There's more information and new paradigms that you're creating, Greg, that have trickled down to all three of us. But I don't know, man. Like, it's a little overwhelming, and I wonder about where this goes. Like, what does performance optimization look like, or injury prevention, or injury recovery look like in 10 years?
Yeah, I remember having this conversation because I did a presentation to the Red Sox medical crew, and as I was showing them stuff, you could see there. I don't know. There was a panic, but they kind of freaked out because they were like, "Well, is this a dysfunction? Is this a disease? Should we put this guy on the IR if we find these things?" Right? Like, they weren't sure what to do. When I'm like, "Look, here's a problem," and it's not that he can't run, but he's at higher risk for something going wrong, and so you want to be pit crew and keep him on the racetrack. Well, somebody better keep an eye on this, but off season, somebody better take some time to sort this out and not blow this off. Because I can understand in season, there's a lot of pressure. Right? We got to go. We got a game. We got to go. And no one wants to be on the IR if they don't have to. And differentiating between dysfunction and injury, which is where I could see they were kind of freaking out a little bit because it meant something to categorize a player a certain way, right? And so I just said, look, you need someone on your staff, somebody who's going to at least understand the baseline here and keep an eye on it so that they can at least say, hey, look, this thing is getting more vulnerable, right? Because we're losing range, we're losing force output, the sensations, increasing. We got to stop. Or, you know what, it's a stable dysfunction, doesn't seem to be getting worse. You can still run on it, can still sprint. We'll keep an eye on it, right? And so it definitely needs to be some kind of a balance there. But in season management, tough. That's a tough problem.
Greg, have you seen more? Sorry, Ben. Have you seen historically less injuries now than the 80s of professional sports, or the 90s, or the 2000s? And I just see it more prevalent, this like sports scientist whole division that, hundreds of thousands of dollars is dumped into with professional organizations at a minimum.
Hell yeah.
I just can't wrap my head around it. I played, 12 years, and every year it seemed to me like the same amount of injuries for one guy or the other, but the budget just keeps going up and up and up, and more staff are coming on and trying to figure out this like puzzle. And it just seems like there is never, Sean, going to be like this, oh yeah, take this pill and you're great. It almost seems like all the resources are just in, I guess, preventative from what you're saying. But I think what you do is more diagnosing the problem and then trying to mitigate the injury. Whereas sports science seems to be, let's take all the data and figure out if we've got a magic formula.
Yeah, that's absolutely what's happening, Brett. I think, which I understand. Quantify, and I don't want to downplay quantification. It's nice to quantify some things, but I could see even talking with the Red Sox medical team. They were putting a lot of emphasis on this force plate and what they were seeing there, and the force production of the hamstrings and the Nordic curl thing, and trying to correlate that to overall performance of the athlete. Gray Cook tried this, right, with the FMS screen. Do these 7 things, and we're gonna see what your risk for injury is. Didn't work. It didn't work. It didn't show any validity or reliability at all. It just became kind of a fitness assessment tool. And so I just don't think that there's any one or two, measurable variables of physical motor output that you can take to say, yes, when we see a decrement here, we're going to see a problem later there. The system's way too dynamical, for that. But it's fun, I can see it's fun to have all these little tools and toys to play with. But when I spoke with one of the strength conditioning guys, he'd been in professional baseball, right? 20, 25 years. He said, took me aside. He goes, there's no decrease in injuries. Everybody's getting injured, same injuries. I'm like, wow, dude. I said, what are you guys doing? What are you guys doing? I said, man,
so what that sounds like to me, is that we need more specialists. We need more educated, more informed people, not force plates, not, hyperbaric chambers, although those are amazing. Is we need people who know what to look for, who know how to talk to people, how to care for people, how to support people, to say, okay, I don't care what the force plate says. You're based on what you're telling me and what I know and through my experiences, it's the fascia on your right shoulder that's messing with your left hip. And nobody else would have figured that out through any sort of tech, right? Is that kind of the way forward?
Yes, immeasurable. Plus the sensation part, right? This is the subjective part. Where do you feel these problems? When do you feel these things? And how long do you feel them for, right? All these things are clues. They're all things to help, part of the data set to go, let me think this through, right? And so, profiling the system is key. And everyone should be baselined as soon as they come in the door. They need baselines on all this stuff, not just the force plate and the Nordic curling, but all the range of motion, their shoulders, their neck, and their trunk, and their hips, and their knees, and their feet, right? And all the manual testing that we do, all that needs to be built. So now you at least have a reference as the athlete progresses to be like, you're losing something that you had before. You shouldn't be losing anything that you had before. And maybe we should be gaining some things, right? And so, and especially if they get injured at any point, off season, on season, non-contact, contact. That needs to be immediately folded into what you know about their system. And so critical decisions can be made to stave that thing off. Not everybody needs to do that, but I agree with you, Sean. I think one or two per organization, somebody, that they can go to and say, look, go see this dude. He's going to figure it out. We don't have time. He does. Go see him.
Yeah.
It turns out there's a program out there that teaches this stuff that he has that people could find.
That's right.
At www.exercisepro.com.
Do it if you want to learn how to do it. So, but it's not for the faint.
I mean, I'm a soccer coach and I've gone through it.
But it's not for everybody. You got to really, you got to really like problems. You got to like solving problems. So not everybody likes solving problems.
We have to have you have to have a philosophical agreement, though, and I think, again, latching onto the body view concept is the one. Even with all the fancy sports science shit that you have out there, if the body view's off, the data's not going to lead you in the right direction anyway. So I think getting that ingrained and normalized, probably starting at younger and younger ages, is critical.
Yeah, I agree. Education, interpretive power. Yeah, what does this data mean? Data, just collecting data to look at it. Who cares? Got to mean something.
Yeah,
for sure. What do you think, Bradley?
Yeah, I think it was awesome. I think, opening up for Greg to close it out maybe with a nickname.
We forgot the nicknames.
Nick, I'm ready.
Right, Greg. So we ask every single guest, what are your nicknames from your youth sports days up till now?
Oh, well, with the last name of Mack, right? I've had McElravy and Let me think. What else? McElravy was a hot one. Everyone called me McElravy. Daddy Mac. People would call me Daddy Mac. So they would do that.
Nice.
Some people called me the resource because I always seem to have something to provide and help and figure out the problem. So that's a
Mac truck.
Mac truck. Yeah. So some people call me that. So yeah.
The resource is a very strong nickname. That's
resource is good.
Nice. Okay, we'll go with the resource. Okay.
Yeah, that's like a character from the Matrix or something. We need to consult with the resource.
You'll finally reach your guru status that you're in pursuit of.
No,
that's what you want.
I'm not interested in stuff. I'll just show you what to do, and you can do it.
Well, this has been so cool. I want to reserve the right, if you're up for it, Greg, to have you back a number of times, because we're just scratching the surface of some of this stuff, and for general awareness for people to understand that the way that they've been thinking about training and recovery and how their body works is probably all fucking wrong, and it's okay. It takes some time, but
new ideas, new ideas.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna let you go, Greg, and then we're gonna take a few minutes to kind of recap after this. So, thank you so much for being on the podcast today, man.
Thanks, guys. It was great meeting you. I had a blast. Happy to join again. That was a lot of fun.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you, Greg.
Yep.
Wow, the resource.
That should be his Instagram handle.
That one's pretty hard.
Yeah, that's sweet.
Can you imagine?
Go ahead. Sorry.
Can you imagine just the intellect it takes to keep all of that shit together in your head?
No.
Oh my goodness, dude! The courses I take with him, your hair is just blowing backwards, and it's taken me. Obviously, I've been in this industry now for 13, 14 years now, taking courses, and every time, just the depth of information he has just blows you away. And to watch him work is incredible. I do think sometimes because of what he knows and how much he knows, it makes people go a little iffy. They're like, "Oh, this is a threat. This is crazy."
Yeah,
I'm sure that's the stuff he ran up against with the Red Sox. Is like, holy shit, this guy knows some stuff. And then with how much he knows, they think, how are we going to learn this?
Yeah.
But again, as a soccer coach in this world, which is what I am, you can learn it, you can do it, and there's smart people that can. It's just getting the messaging right and getting people to buy in is critical.
Yeah.
I'd like to have him on and then have I think Dave Tinney is more. I mean, he's a leader in his field, obviously, but having them communicate would be a really interesting conversation about how they view the body and the processes of, the science side and recovery and performance. Because I think there's little bits and pieces to learn from both sides. But to me, it's still, I've been going to MAT since, 2010 maybe, and getting that done. And it kind of blew my mind, right? I'd go in with calf pain and then I leave with nothing. And it's like, well, wait, I just spent a week icing it and, cold bath and hot bath and ultrasound. And then I go do this one thing and I feel like my muscle's not going to snap in half.
Yeah.
It's really wild. And it'd be good to see him in a debating setting, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, for sure. And I think with Dave Tenney too, he's certainly evolved since back in the original days, and he takes into account cognitive states, emotional states much more, which is cool. And I've been meaning to reach out to him. But yeah, getting someone who they can do a little back and forth, that would be pretty fun to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that'd be pretty fun to watch.
James, you could still throw a cutter if they took your lingus from your right arm and put it in your left.
Yeah, maybe. I kept on thinking about my injuries. Like, all right, what's he saying here? Kind of thinking about, because like my last year, the doctor told me that my UCL was stretched out, and I was like, I don't know how this happened. And then I just remembered after he was talking about things and how they connect and communicate and stuff, and they had to reattach my flexor as well. I know the flexor works in unison with the UCL to throw a pitch, and whenever I threw, it just felt different after my surgery. I never felt the same, and it just made me think like maybe my flexor wasn't supporting my UCL like it used to or enough, and so that caused my UCL to stretch out. Just it's so interesting how he thinks about the body and how everything kind of communicates, and that when you go in and change things, the communication changes, and sometimes it's hard to retrain those things that communicate in the same way as before or close to the same way as before.
Well, and you yourself have done that so many times: retrain, surgery, recover, retrain, bounce back, throw fast, throw well, be consistent, and being able to retrain. Like, you would be an excellent case study, I think, for understanding, an example of resilience and retraining the body to make those adaptations. Cause like when he first said early in the conversation, like, yeah, once you have an injury, it's never the same. Like, the body learns other ways to compensate and to figure that out, but it's never going to be the same. It's like, oh, damn.
But imagine if you had someone like that in a locker room, and obviously he's on this worldly level, but instead of spending hours working on something that may not actually be the problem, just someone who could data collect and go, here's the things that we really need to work on, instead of wasting time.
Totally. And like just the thing he was talking about where like training, like what do you do? I feel like I was trained at times where it was like training me to be an outfielder or an infielder. But like, no, I'm trying to throw a baseball and then cover first base. That's all I need to do. Maybe field a bunt here. Like I feel like we started doing that towards the end, Ben. We were training specifically about like, for what I was trying to do. But I just feel like built to do certain things. And like, I was baseball and I needed to like really train very specifically for that thing because I was not built to be an outfielder. I wouldn't make it catcher. My knees would explode. But yeah, I just found that very, very interesting.
I think to Ben's point is with his knowledge and history and background and just consistently doing what he's been doing, how has a $1 billion sports team not just said, hey, come in for a year and be here full time and we'll write whatever check you want to write to you. I wonder if you should have asked him, is it he doesn't want to do that? Has he been offered that? Has a sports team come along and said, we want you? I'm just wondering if there's just too much of a paradigm, and to shift it, it's just, it would shake the world.
It's a threat to the status quo
right.
And these systems we have in place. And it's something that he beats his head against the wall, like just like all this stuff that we're talking about. It's going to require a social change, and we got to rebuild this thing.
Well, and ego involved too. There's some egos in this world, in the sport training world, sports science world. I think that's, he comes in and tells them something like, hey, you're wrong about this. You got to look at it this way. They may just say like, all right, we're done talking to you because I don't want to hear that I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Worried about their jobs, right? Because some people have been doing it the same way for 30, 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
If it changes the game about this whole thing, so there's going to be some people that are going to be out of a job, So
we're also looking at it with the wisdom of being injured or having our careers, we're done now. Anyway, like we can look back and go like, I wish we had that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, young version of you and would go through his process and go, do I need to be doing this? What's the point here? Maybe do I need all this data? So as long as the messaging was correct on his end on what we're doing, we're getting this baseline for your career, and so we can manage you long term. That might be a good sell, but young version of me didn't want to listen to anybody. Like, fix it and let's go.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so that's probably the tricky part is again, reframing all this stuff. So here's how we're going to keep track of you for your career and keep you going.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's exciting, right? It to me, it indicates some changes are coming, right? Some people we're eventually going to come around to this, and people are going to live. They're going to have healthier careers. They're going to have healthy, personal lives. They're going to be, emotionally resilient, and also be able to walk, normally after they're done playing, type of a thing. It's to me, I'm half glass full by nature, but I think that this is like hopefully the beginning of the change of a major change for high level athletes.
Yeah.
The physics of change is, like I've said before, is really tough though, because you start to have people trickle in. Like you have a momentum built in one way that we do things. Then you get people who are there to change the game, starting to change the game. People are starting to buy into it, but you still have this middle part where nothing feels like it's changing, although awareness about things is starting to change. And then you need to go back the other direction, and then you get momentum going the other way. So I think we're in this kind of middle space where there's a lot more awareness of what's going on, and people are trying to figure it out. Someone like him, who I think has really pieced a lot of it together and knows how to show how it all interrelates, and here's how you collect the data, and now here's how you apply it. He needs to be out there more.
Yeah.
Massively. Like I think he's got standards of how he does things that need to be the standards across the board, especially in a pro sports organization if you want these guys to perform the best. And foundationally, I think at younger ages, here's how you need to start taking care of yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you were saying, the messaging, like kind of selling.
Yeah.
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 Awesome.
Yeah.
That was cool.
Good stuff, fellas.
Appreciate you guys. That was it's a different type of guest than we usually have.
Yeah,
cool.
I assume we'll have him back at some point to weigh back in, because I had 17 different questions in the back of my mind that I didn't get to ask. So
He'd probably be good on your podcast too.
he would be. Yeah, I should have him on for sure, because that's my whole audience is meathead performance go-getter types, that are always walking around with injuries.
Meathead go-getters.
Meathead go-getters. Optimal performance.
Dude, you have the same haircut as your dog.
Yeah, bad. Yeah,
something on the top. You've got some sort of doodle dog that's got like a 1980s mohawk thing going.
I do. It's not a good haircut. It's like it's corny. It's like trying to be funny, but fits the brand.
Oh.
I'm going to Vaughn Sauna right now in Caroline Point, the floating sauna, wood burning, and then jump in the lake during your session. Yeah. I'll report back. Me and Kellen Rowe went out to Woodinville and did the fire sauna on Tuesday night, which was awesome too. Great spot.
How long is your session?
They're hour. Vaughn Sauna's hour 15 out in Woodinville. Josh does hour-long sessions.
Oh.
Is it like a spa that you go to, or what? What is it?
No, it's this dude. He actually lives two doors down from me. He built a floating sauna in the marina, and I think there's two now there. So he's only there like 6 months out of the year, and then when boat season comes, he takes them out of the water. But yeah, he gets the fire stoked, and it's like group. There's like 18 people allowed, depending on what time you go, right? So gonna go check it out, and it's a 2-minute drive, so it's money.
That sounds
and it's
cool.
close to you too, then, James, huh?
Yeah. So what's the point?
Down.
Then you jump into the lake, like afterwards?
It's just contrast therapy. Yeah, sauna for how long you can take it, and then jump in the lake, and then just cycle through for an hour.
Oh, you shrink your nuts.
Yeah, just keep going.
Sauna, I see. That's cool.
Yeah,
that's killer. Yeah.
Say that again.
The one in Woodinville. What was that one about?
That's the same thing. So it's a wood burning sauna. You can fit another, like 16 to 18 people. And then he's got cold plunges just right out front. So you just cycle through and do the same exact thing. Yeah.
Gotcha.
It's really nice. Yeah.
Walk away feeling like $1 million.
That's right.
I'm going to check that out.
Yeah.
I got to work, guys.
All right.
All right, fellas.
Thanks a lot.
Good one.
See you, boys.
See ya.
Adios.
See you guys.